Hi guys, and welcome to another art tutorial. Today we're going to be working with body parts. And so when we're talking about body parts, it's the ones that I am providing for you on Schoology. So here is one of our examples. I'm going to be doing this demo with our feet because I really like the overlapping and I can see very clearly on this print the darks and the lights on here. So I'll be using that to my advantage. So first off, I need to kind of explain you have watercolor paper for this project. We're doing it a little bit differently just to kind of cope with different things that might be happening right now. So I understand that this paper is very long and narrow. So I know if you have an image like this, it's going to have some little parts that kind of overlap off of the page. That's fine. Don't even worry about that too much, okay? So what you're going to most likely use, because I'll provide it over at school, is a light box or a tracing box, as you know. And that's fine, you can use that, but let's say you're doing this at home because we're quarantined for whatever reason, and you don't have access to a light box. Well, if you remember in my classes, I only have 2 light boxes, so most of the time, I usually have you use a little bit of tape and you use a window. And since it's snowing outside, I have really good light. So I'm going to pause this video for a brief moment. I'm going to trace this image off and then I can start showing you what the next steps are for you in this project. Okay, give me just a second. All right, so I finished tracing off my image, and as you can tell on here, a little portion got cut off here and a little bit on the heel. But I'm okay with that because this actually looks really nice, even with it cut off, because everything is very centered on here. Now, other than me tracing off like the main outline of the foot and the toes and details, you'll notice that I have these light sketches on here, and those lines are to help represent, areas that are bright and areas that are dark. So that way, whenever I start painting, I can keep that in mind about location. So what I want to talk about before we get started on color is, as you know, in your semi project with your skin tone that you were doing for your hand, we discovered, we use a lot of different colors to get underlining tones or highlights or other things, and it's never just one color. We use like 3 or 5 colors on this. So when we're going to be doing this particular project, you have several options. You can try to do skin tone colors, and I'm perfectly fine with that. If you're having a great time with it, do it. But if, let's say, you're quarantined, you don't have access to like all the skin color, like things that we have, like raw sienna and stuff, but you have like your primaries, you have at least white and black or something, this is where I'm giving you these options. You can go with a more warm tone color scheme or a cool color scheme. And when I'm talking about that, what I'm talking about specifically, if you remember on our color wheel exercise, we have our primaries, which is red, yellow, blue. But whenever we have our secondaries and our tertiaries fill in, we could actually look at it and see, okay, anything from our red all the way down to our yellows or even our light green. That's really considered like our warmer tones, because I usually think, as to remember myself, I think of fall. When all the colors are changing, I think of warmth, and that's what I kind of associate with those colors. Now, if I want to do a cool color scheme, I think of the other half of the color wheel where it's going from my purple down to my greens. And so I have that beautiful arrangement of my blues, my violets, my greens, my teals. Those are cool colors. And the reason I'm talking about this is because, again, if you are doing this assignment and you are quarantined, if you don't have access to all the colors like we did in class, that's okay. Don't freak out or anything. So what I'm going to do in this exercise is I'm going to stick with my cool colors, because I think that this would be really cool to paint this with a lot of nice like yellows, greens, and blues. And so I'm going to use yellow as my main highlight, and as a reminder for you, highlights being where the light is the brightest on our objects or our feet on this one. Our blue is going to be our shadow, where it's the darkest part on here. And our green is going to be our mid-tone, and that's where you see like that in-between base color on here, okay? It's a little confusing as I say it, but once I start showing you how I apply it, it will make a lot more sense. So I'm going to pause this for a quick sec. I'm going to prep all my stuff over here on the side, and that way when I run this video again, you can see exactly where I'm going from, okay? Give me just a sec. Welcome back. I went ahead and mixed up some of my colors so I could show you what I'm talking about when we're doing our cool color scheme. And I know it's a little hard to see on my palette, so I will do my best at pointing out which colors are real paint and what's not dry. So, all right, I have my white on here. So if I want to lighten up some areas or have some nice highlights later, I can use the white. I have my yellow, my blue, my purple. Just if I really want to make something look dark, I'm going to use that purple for my help. I have a blue green, a yellow green, and my regular green that I mixed with these two colors here. So what I'm going to do is get my water cup and my paintbrush. Let me see which one. Probably going to use this one. It's small, but it's stiff and it's flat, luckily, on the tip of it. So that will be easier for me to move around my paint and stuff. So what I'm going to do is direct the camera downward so you can kind of see what I'm doing as I go along. Okay. All right, so I'm going to move my colors to the side so I have a little bit more room for this. Move my stick over there. Okay, so I'm going to still have my image that I drew and trace this nearby so I can look for my darks, my lights, all that stuff. But just kind of like we did with our skin tones, we need to have a base coat first. And so what I'm going to do is get my paintbrush a little wet. I'm going to use my green that I originally mixed up, get a little watered down, but not too much, just enough to kind of get it on the paintbrush. And I'm going to look at my black and white image to see, okay, where do I think my midtones are? And so I'm going to kind of pick on different areas, and I can go back later and make it darker or lighter if I need to. So a little bit of that. So let's see, on this particular image, I feel like my midtone is somewhere in here. And when we're talking about midtone, we're talking about it's not your brightest area and it's not your darkest area. So it's just in between, like we've done with our exercises before, but I don't like to assume everybody always remembers that. So I always like to point it out just in case you forgot. All right, so I got my green area here. And it looks like on this side of the foot, that looks like it's my brightest point based off the image. And so what I'm going to purposely do, out, is get a little bit of my yellow, load it up on the brush, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to put it in the brightest part. A little bit of water to help spread that out a bit. And remember, you're using watercolor paper, so it does absorb really well with water, but you don't want to load it up with too much water because, as some of you may have learned with our SME project with skin tones, you don't want to put wet paint on wet paint because your bristles pretty much are like nails and you're scratching the paper thin and basically will cause a hole in it. So you need to be patient, use that time to let it dry. If you want to cheat and put it in front of a fan or use a blow dryer, preferably on a low setting, don't get your paint everywhere kind of thing, then do that. Use the advantages that you have at home if you are doing this at home. So I'm going to finish out my highlight area on this part of my foot by adding a little bit of my yellow in areas. Okay. All right. I think I got most of the highlights on this part done. And I'm not going to really touch it until later because I do want this to dry. So I'm going to work a little bit more on my midtones and a little bit on my shadows so you can see how am I using my cool colors and a little bit of my warm colors, truthfully, because the yellow is considered warm, to recreate my foot. So I'm going to go back, add some more of my blue now. We're going to be putting that where I think like the darkest point of my shadows and stuff are. So it looks like on this particular image, I would say my shadows, because I'm working right here on here. This is the yellow area. I have my green here. I would say I'm probably going to start adding some blues in this darker points, especially down here between the toes, and maybe even on this part where the other foot overlaps. So let's take that and get a little bit of water to help spread the paint a bit. Let's see. here. And it's okay if some of my thing is like translucent, meaning I'm using more water than paint, because sometimes I like to do that so that way I kind of know, hey, once this dries, if it's not dark enough, I can add more layers and stuff. So that's perfectly fine. Okay, I got this dark part of the toe coming down. That. I'm gonna do a little bit in this area, it looks like, based off the shadows. Get a little bit of water. Okay. It'll nice and spread out. All right, so I'm going to show you what I have so far, and I know it's not going to make sense at first. I'll pause the video, I'll fill in more areas, and that way you have a better idea of like, oh, this is what I'm trying to do if I go this route. So I'm going to turn my painting towards you so you can see what's going on here. So right now it looks kind of like an abstract painting. It doesn't make much sense. And it truly doesn't look a lot like, well, this image, but that's okay. I'm looking for my darks, I'm looking for my midtones and my highlights. So I'm gonna pause this video for just a brief moment. I'm gonna fill in most of my colors and then I need to let it dry because as you know, you can't put wet paint on wet paint. Or at least you shouldn't. So I'm gonna pause this for a brief sec so you can see the results. All right, guys, so I finished up my feet and I wanna give the camera a little bit more of an up part so you can kind of see when I hold them side by side what that real comparison looks like. So here is the original image that we were working with. And then here is the final version. So as you can see, I thought about my shadows, my highlights, my midtones, all of that stuff. And then I used my white at the very, very end. And I purposely used areas like right where the light hits the edge of the foot. There's still like a little bit of shadow, but at the same time, there's really this bright light that's hitting it. So I did that over my yellow. I also did it a little bit on my toes and a little bit over here on this other foot and stuff. But I have to say, considering I just did this in like 10, maybe 15 minutes, not bad. I'm actually pretty proud. So, oh, and as you can see, I will purposely turn my camera because everybody loves to see him. There is Salem. Unfortunately, during the video, when I paused it, he stepped on the stovetop when Clint was making tea and may have slightly burnt his paw. Doesn't look bad, I already checked it, but yeah, it looks like he's just gonna make home right there and not move probably. So anyway, moving back, remember you have several days to do this. I did this in like 15, 20 minutes maybe. So understand, I know what I'm doing. I know how to do it really quick, but I really, really want you to use that time wisely. Whether we are quarantined at home and you're doing this, you know, every other day to work a little bit, even 10 minutes a day would make a huge difference. But don't rush through this. Have some fun. Let yourself be patient, experiment. If you mess up, guess what? Acrylic is way more forgiving than you think. If you let it dry and then you paint like another color on top of it, no one's going to see the mistake. Also, big golden rule, I don't know it's a mistake unless you tell me. So just don't tell me it's a mistake. So anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this because this was a lot of fun. And even if you end up just doing skin tone colors, because if you do have access to my room, awesome, do it. But you know, not a bad idea to kind of experiment with your colors there. So just saying. All right, as always, ask questions, send me messages, and I hope you really have a great time. Can't wait to see you next time, guys. All right, bye.